Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining me on this session. This is a new series of developer training, and it's going to take you through a whole set of skills, really starting from the inside out. We're going to look at the product inside out and cover just about everything from the internal structures of Sage CRM's architectures through to some of the secrets of the way in which really Sage CRM understands the world and how architecture and design works, through to the APIs, and we will look at everything that makes Sage CRM such a great development hub tool, as well as a fantastic general purpose CRM product. Now, my name's Jeff Richards. I work as part of the development team in Dublin. I'm based in the UK, but the development team is in Dublin, and I look after quite a lot of the technical in education. So I do a lot of conversations between customers and partners, as well as my colleagues in development, acting very much as an interlocutor. So somebody who speaks between the customer, the partner, and the development team, trying to make improvements in the product. And hopefully you've seen quite a new set of directions as we've been pressing ahead with innovations like the narrative recently and the new forms of integration with Exchange. Well, let me press on. As you have questions, please do put them into the Q&A. I can't promise that I will look at them in a dynamic fashion, but by the end of the session, any of the questions that you have, I will spend time answering. Now, I do want to think about who does development. Now, although this series of courses is all aimed at developers, I expect anyone who is working in supporting customers and supporting implementations and carrying out implementations will also benefit. There's a lot of, if you like, sacred mysteries that we are going to uncover as we talk through. Now, a lot of this is not particularly hard, but if you don't know it, well, you don't know it. And there are some things that are implicit within the documentation that I need to make explicit here as we talk through. Now, there's a recognition is that not everyone that works with Sage CRM is a code guru, somebody who is actually somebody who does a lot of development all the time. Some people are perfectly used to working with coding languages like C#, if they are into .NET development. There may be people amongst us who are more senior in their use of the product, who've actually been around since 2.85. I'm laughing because I've been around since 2.85. I've been working with the product now for over 22 years, and it's scary thinking about how much it's changed. But most of our partners, most of our customers are people who are regular folks who are very happy to give development a go, especially when they can go through the process of cut and paste. And most people have other jobs to do, especially within organizations. So they are doing CRM as a side project. And those are the perfect people really for this course, because I want to be able to give you some fast tracks into the way in which Sage CRM works, so you can get an understanding of that. Now, looking ahead into what we're doing for not only this next hour as we're together, but also through the rest of the classes. Now, you can see here that I've divided the world up into 18 sessions. I could probably have added actually 25, 30, however many, but these are the core topics that I want to talk about. We're going to start off with today just an introduction, getting a sense of the orientation and the the bigness of the product, the technologies involved, and some of the areas that we will be thinking about as a set of themes as we talk through the material. Excuse me. So you can dip in, dip out. The link that you've got should keep working because this is a series of training courses. So do, if you've not been able to register through the Eventbrite link, do keep trying the link because you should be able to do this, get into this. Now let's start off with understanding Sage CRM in context. It is a generalist CRM tool. It doesn't have a particular vertical focus. It actually is used to manage customer sites, whether they are membership systems, whether they are asset management systems, whether they are loan management systems, cemetery management, pet dentistry, all the way through to managing the veterinary practices and some aspects of healthcare as well. So it's used across a very wide range of industries with integrations that partners have created into construction and real estate, through into Intact, into Sage 300, 200, etc. So it is an integrated tool, but it has at its heart modules that ensure that it has good standard behavior within sales, marketing, customer service. And it's working with different interfaces, whether you prefer to work in the context of say, a browser. It's a browser-based product, so you'll be working with a browser. But whether you're wanting to interact with a mobile device, or whether you want to work in any particular environment which has got integrations with Exchange, which has got a complex set of back office applications that allow that back office information to be fed through into the front end. So CRM is very much a hub that allows you to bring a whole set of things together and provide a good set of operational tools that include workflow and escalation behavior through to management of reporting as well. Now, our integrations within the context of the cloud and the environments that we're working with, this is where our APIs become very, very important. Now, I will be going through all of the APIs, so I will be looking at all of the different development mechanisms that we can use, the codeless customizations that can be carried out using Runblock. And if you don't know what that is, well, it'll gradually become clearer as we talk about these different things, but I'll be mentioning, words as we go through. Whether it's the classic API, classic ASP mechanisms, whether it's the .NET, but probably the most important elements is to talk about things like the REST APIs and the SOAP APIs, giving you choice in how you integrate with the products. And Sage CRM is its own exemplar. Again and again in these lessons, I am going to be looking at how, if you see inside CRM, you can see how things are done, because we provide examples of how things are done. So you can see the way in which we use the REST APIs in order to be able to carry out the integrations with Outlook, Exchange rather, to be able to import emails and contacts. You can start to see how we can upload documents using the REST APIs. You can start to see how when we come on to looking at, say, the .NET APIs, you can start to see the examples that are available within the product, like the related entities and like the narrative features, which make use of the API itself. We, in terms of our commitment to the product and its own internal APIs and its own workflows and everything. We eat our own dog food. We use the product in order to create the product, and we use the APIs to extend the product as well. So we'll be learning more about that as we go through. Now, everything that I say, I encourage you to trust me, but then to verify what I've said. So I would encourage you to get used to the idea of using the documentation that is available to you. The place that I expect you to have bookmarked to make sure that you're using is our help center, help.sagecrm.com. It is the place to go when you're looking for information about the supported versions of Sage CRM, the internal com API. That's the, as we start to explore that, that's how we can add business rules into scripts that take place within the context of the web server, how we can use classic ASP for very simple scripting of pages. Well, you can also get very complex pages, but essentially it's a really quite a simple, gentle scripting environment. How we can then look to using Mail Manager scripts. We'll come on to that in about our 6th lesson. How we can work with client-side coding as well. That's the full set of client-side, whether it is just looking at if this has changed, then change the behavior of this field, through to let's make sure that we're using some Ajax techniques in order to pull up information that otherwise would not be available within the interface. So all of that was in the context of help.sagecrm.com, as well as the support cycle as to which versions of Sage CRM you need to be aware of, dropping out of support, and think useful tools for support and implementation, like troubleshooting guides and the implementation workbook. All of that on help.sagecrm.com. The other site which I think you need to bookmark and be aware of is developer.sage.com. Sage CRM was one of the first products that Sage placed onto developer.sage.crm because of the REST APIs that we've got. You'll see it's listed there in amongst the midsection for documentation, along with 300 intact and other products. And you can see that we've got both the REST documentation and the .NET documentation up there as well. So those are, if you like, emphasizing that those are our modern APIs that we anticipate most people wanting to use. Now, another source of information is community.sagecrm.com. Now, this is where you would get the SDK installer. This is where you would get a whole, and the SDK installer is associated with the .NET API. Again, when we come on to that, we'll be looking at the way in which we use that. It's got some very useful snippets and products within that. The SDK. It's got a lot of Visual Studio snippets that cover everything from the client side API through to general scripting JavaScript samples, so that you can very quickly assemble how to do things. You've got wizards. The advanced customization wizard or the entity wizard is also available on community.sagecrm.com. You've got, as well as sample components that demonstrate techniques, and these include things like the SOAP test harness, which if you're trying to understand the SOAP web services, this is a very useful tool to allow you to do that. And it's also got links in the training environment to go off to some short training videos, which are very useful. Now, those videos are all found on YouTube, and I'll mention that in a moment. But another source of information is found, of course, on Sage City. Sage City is a dynamic resource in the sense that it's constantly being added to by people like myself or David Beard, who are writing articles that are useful, and my support colleagues who are also contributing articles explaining how certain things work. It's all about hints, tips and tricks. And the important aspect about Sage City, of course, is that it's got the discussion forums which allow you to pose questions and interact with fellow practitioners who will be able to give you guidance on how you should be able to do things within the product. One of the final resources to, the final resource to mention is the Sage support and training channel on YouTube. You can see there youtube.com/@Sage support, and you can go straight there and discover Sage CRM videos with a searchable playlist on different development techniques, as well as features and product usage as well. Let's take a break from thinking about the documentation and now come back into the product, and I'm going to start thinking about the nature of Sage CRM's architecture. Now, Sage CRM back in version 7 took a very severe change of direction, and it has a foot in a number of, two separate camps. It has a hybrid architecture which provides us with both strengths and some challenges to understand where things are done and how things are done. But hopefully the next few slides will start to really clarify things for you in that understanding. Now imagine you're using Sage CRM, and I'm going to assume that everyone is familiar here with Sage CRM screens, and you're used to looking up at the URLs that you see at the top of your screen. And a URL may well look something like this. So you're directed at a server, you know the install name, and then you see this marvelous thing called the EWARE-DLL being mentioned. And after the EWARE-DLL, you will have a query string that follows that with a whole set of named value pairs, indicating that there are parameters that are being passed to the EWARE-DLL. So we need to understand what that EWARE-DLL is. And what we've got here is a diagram that is representing that at its heart, Sage CRM is driven by the EWARE-DLL, which is what's called an IS-API extension. Now we know that Sage CRM is a web application. So your customer, your users are using CRM in a browser, making HTTP requests to an endpoint, and that endpoint is the EWARE-DLL. So that EWARE-DLL is on a web server and is actually the way in which it's installed is it becomes part of the web server. As much as an ASP page or an HTML page is part of the resources of that web server. And it means as well that any of the parameters, any of the information passed to the web server gets passed through the gateways there into the EWARE-DLL. Now, the EWARE-DLL is responsible for receiving the request, so directly the request that comes from the browser, and being able to turn that request into what we understand as the CRM interface. So for the request, there will be a response which generates the interface, or generates, if you've attempted to log on and you've provided the wrong credentials, it will generate the appropriate error response. So our EWARE-DLL is doing a number of things, including the generation of the session, managing the persistence of the session, providing the way in which the interface is created, and the business rules and the workflow that is then managed as we do our work. But that whole set of interfaces, as well as the business data that you're looking at, is ultimately stored within inside a system database, and that is our MS SQL Server database, which may well be an Azure instance of an Azure SQL. It could well be a web edition SQL Server. It could be on a very small implementation. It could be SQL Express. It doesn't matter. Same principle is applying here, is that that database is holding both application data, the business data, as well as what we call metadata, the data that describes the system and controls how and what is going to be displayed into the screen. So the metadata is describing everything to do with the structure of the screens that we get to see. Now, that's not the only thing that is within our remit of our product. We can see that we add to this services that are running on the server, and they act as additional, almost like users without an interface, interacting with the eWare DLL, but it's behind the scenes. There isn't a at this point, there isn't a web transaction. These are taking place on the server, hitting the registration of that object that exists on the server to be able to affect change inside the system. Ultimately, each of these services, which govern the management of inbound emails and automatic responses, that's the mail manager, the escalation service, which is managing behavior as and when particular circumstances occur within a time frame, the indexing server to do with searches and positioning of data, and quick find to do with the rapid being able to type in a first 3 letters and have responses come out within the top bar of CRM. These are all actors on the server that are all working through to the eWare DLL, again, ultimately drawing information from the system database through that connection that the eWare DLL is managing. Now, our system is more complex than that, because we can extend it using the principle that metadata describes screens. We can start to add in our own data objects, which describe new elements to our system. So Sage CRM supports, right at the beginning, I described how we have sales, marketing, and customer service. Well, what if you want to be able to do project management? What if you want to do extensions to warranty management, or start to do asset descriptions and warehouse management, or wanting to include elements of some HR and planning into the system? Well, you can do that because you can build new entities in CRM, defined within the database, understood and described inside metadata, which are then seen inside the CRM interface. And that's through either the ASP or the .NET APIs. These are all, though, ultimately communicating through the eWare DLL. So that's very much the structure that is through the eWare DLL. But again, we do more than that. We've added into this more elements, because, as I said, in version 7, we added a new layer of behavior as we started to explore new ways of working with Sage CRM, and this is through the addition of Tomcat. Tomcat is a lightweight web server that can work with web apps that do specific things. So it's a parallel web server that will look after particular aspects of Sage CRM. We'll explore this in a second as to what it's doing. but it is when a request comes in to into the web server, which is IIS, if it contains calls to a particular endpoint, it will be redirected off into with the redirection rules automatically into the Tomcat web server. And it's the Tomcat web server which will have web apps, which again communicate through to the database and to the metadata, automatically responding and handling the response. Always we think in terms of the HTTP request and then the HTTP response that comes back. Now let's look a little bit more at some of those services and the web apps and start to understand what's going on here. This is just focusing then on the web app area that is managed through Tomcat and the use of Java, because in the end the language that is dependent on, or Tomcat depends on, is Java. And what we can see here is that as requests come in, we might well be working on different features, whether it's the integration with Exchange or whether it is working with some of the features associated with the spelling checking of the email templates, etc. There is more going on because actually the Tomcat web app of CRM-J is also going to be responsible for the production of the interactive dashboards with inside Sage CRM, the management of database data import and export, things like the document drop feature and the automatic filing of emails, the whole aspect of actually email imports, and they're all new features which depend on that. The REST API is also through the Tomcat side and the Java side of the application. So that's why back in this diagram we see that REST is added into the diagram as going through to although everything goes first of all to IIS API, it is redirected through and handled by the Java side of the system. All of them are sharing the same business rules defined within metadata. So there's no difference in the functionality on the sides. There's no catching out on different behavior in terms of security. Everything is bridged across, so it's matched. Now that architecture that we see, we talked about the Java aspects of it. Just want to think about those services that we see, which are really on the eWare DLL side of the product, which is the CRM Mail Manager, the escalation service, the indexing server, the quick find. You can see these amongst your services. You can see these, and some of them will be working and running as you work. So that's really what we're thinking about there in terms of that behavior. We will cover the certain aspects of these services in more detail as we come on to discuss things like escalation rules and as we come on to discuss things like the Mail Manager. So we'll be coming back to talk about this in detail, and that will have relevance, I think, for anyone who has a support interest at that point. Okay, now Sage CRM has a very wide range of choices when it comes to development and working with different ways of extending the user interface or carrying out tasks to import or transfer information between one system and CRM. Let's have a look at some of these. And we will be covering all of these in the course of the remaining lesson. So this is just to give you a flavour of the different ways in which we can do things. The first thing I should say is that anything that we're doing is that CRM is an open application. That there aren't any sort of sources that are secret. Nearly everything that you want to use or you start using, you can see the documented, and Sage CRM allows you to understand what's going on through the documentation, through the blog articles, and actually through the product itself. So it is a perfect tool for allowing you to work out how you can accomplish things. Though it is open, you've got a very wide range of customization options and APIs, and altogether it becomes a very easy product to extend. And you do have to think about how you manage the support for that, and I will be building in to the lectures as we go forward, getting you to think about how do we make sure that once we've written an extension, how we've done some work, how does it become supportable, and how do we allow for the system to be upgraded as easily as possible. So let's go through and start to see some of these. First of all, we have run block. Now this is interesting. This is really the way in which it only uses metadata to be able to define extensions to the interface. It will be looking in the next two lessons exactly how we can do that, because we can define a new view within the system that reports information. We can create a list on that information, and we can then call that screen directly from the interface. You'll see that it is something, it's possible to get a usable and useful page added into Sage CRM very easily without any code being used. Having said that, you know, it comes to a point where, oh, I want to be able to do a little bit more than just have a simple page. I want to be able to do a little bit more. Well, what if the thing that you're trying to do more is a remote system? And that's where we have the REST API. Now, the REST API in Sage CRM is fully CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. It's passing information within the context of JSON. It's actually very, very easy to use. Full documentation on developer.sage.com. And it's not the only way in which we can work. We also have the SOAP APIs. If you are working with older systems, this is also a useful way of being able to exchange. And by the way, you can work our own integration with Exchange, for example, uses at the moment the SOAP Exchange Web Services. We'll be changing that in the course of the next year to the next 2 development cycles to using MS Graph, but we use a SOAP-based interface with one product, but in the internal interaction back inside the product, we're using the REST API. So it's possible to mix and match the use of APIs. And we also have the .NET and the classic ASP systems, which work on the basis of, right, you've defined something in metadata. We're going to call that metadata to quickly constructs the output that we need for screens, but basically I'm going to code using, if it's the classic ASP pages, some JavaScript, and if it's the .NET API, is typically, you write in anything, but typically we write in C#. You'll be able to do whatever you like there and to be able to create the screens that you want. Very basically, you can go as wild as you like with those APIs to be able to create just about any graphical or on-screen element that you want. But we do provide a whole set of very easy to use predefined elements to control everything from buttons through to as editable screens, through to lists, through to columns, to the individual fields, the selection lists, etc. So they're all definable, very easy to be called, and they're all based ultimately on the metadata. So ultimately, if you change the metadata through the administrative screens, the new structures that you create would also change to reflect that. Okay. Our data model, important to understand, is something that is not, it's not an encrypted database, so you know what the tables are storing. The tables are storing company information. The story is calling person information. There's no obscurity in the naming of the tables, and the data model is completely open, and it is discoverable as well. So you can use the inbuilt tools of the database to build your data model, to be able to then be able to discuss that and help you plan for any of the work that you want to do. We also provide, if you're working with a implementation that is some years old and has maybe gone through a set of upgrades and series of customizations, then we also have database scripts that you can download from the community to be able to compare a vanilla system of that particular version with the current database to give you an indication of what new workflow rules have been added, how things have changed, what fields have changed, how data types, etc. have changed. And you can get that. So there is a whole set of tools to help you understand the data structures. Now, a lot of the work that we're doing when we come on into the later lessons is going to be in and around understanding metadata. You can see that I've come in here, I'm looking at a screen that is the system inside the system administration screens. I'm looking at the customization area, and I happen to want to go down and look at, say, the person screen. Well, I can come into the person area. I can then choose to, I happen to be looking at the fields here. I can change aspects of the fields. They will automatically change within the screens. Importantly, I can look at the details of views and understand. A lot of what we'll be doing in the next 2 lessons is understanding the importance of views and how views just about underlie everything in what we do, in how the interface is built. And I'm going to share another technical diagram now. I love technical diagrams. Here you can see I've got a complex diagram that is trying to represent how everything ultimately based on metadata. Let's strip this out and just concentrate on this. When you look at a screen inside Sage CRM, like the person list associated with a company. So you're looking at a list of the people who are in a company. And if you know your demo data, think about Gatecom and think about how you've got a list of people which include Simon Yaltoy down there as our contacts, all in a grid. In order to understand that page, we need to recognize that just about everything, like the connection to the database, has been modeled. The table has been modeled. All of the fields associated on that table are described inside a table inside metadata. So that would be, custom underscore database to describe the link to the database, custom underscore table to describe the link to the person table, custom underscore edit to describe the field, with custom underscore captions to describe the labeling of the field. And then all of those fields are grouped into a structure known as a custom underscore screen object, which is of type customer underscore list. So we've got a list which contains those fields within a structure that is going to be called from a tab group, which is custom underscore tabs. So we eventually get a screen that we can see, and that's how we get any of the structures visible inside our browser. So the eWare DLL, for example, knows how the definitions and the position and the relative order of the fields within a screen or a list structure gets converted into HTML to display inside the screen. There's this concept inside CRM of something called a block. Now, when we look in detail at the classic ASP structure, we'll consider this. Now, a block has the ability to not only describe the connection to the data source, but it also describes the business logic that may be associated with it, and especially then the presentational behavior as it then gets displayed into the interface. So all that metadata is interpreted by the eWare DLL that knows how to make that appear inside the screen as the structure, as the HTML that is processed by the browser. To take it a little bit further, though, we step on into our next slide, you can see that we can extend this concept because we can add new structures into the metadata. This is where we can create our own tables, which are described or in exactly the same way as the person table, and those structures can then be presented into the interface through the use of classic ASP or the .NET API. So this is the way in which we can extend. This is the way in which we can get wider and wider and wider. But it's more than that, because Sage CRM consumes and understands the database and models it, we can then use it to extend out to other systems as well. So in theory, we can connect to systems that are either a linked database or an additional link inside metadata. We can create brand new connections to entirely separate systems, which are then modeled as part of Sage CRM's interface. So we can get additional connections and then bring them into the product. Now, I've started to describe a whole set of different APIs, and they all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses. So if we just consider what those are, I've looked at the idea of using RunBlock. I've talked about the REST and the SOAP APIs, and I've talked about the .NET and the classic ASP pages. As you can start to see from this grid, you would end up choosing a tool based on its ability. So in the case of something like RunBlock, you can see that absolutely you can use it with custom entities, you can use it with the core entities within the system. It's there to generate the interface. It's not suitable if you want to add sort of old management elements into the interface, because it has to work on structures that exist in the database, so it can't do things without reference to the metadata. So that's an immediate limiting factor. There's no debugging of it, and is there a sense that you can start to discover what's going on inside Sage CRM? Yes, absolutely. Anything inside metadata can be discovered. And so you've got that idea of schema discovery is fine. Its ability to manage data is a little bit limited. It's very, very good on reading information, not so great on, certainly not on delete, and not so great on insert and edit. You run into you can run into problems, especially if you're dealing with a complex structure within the interface. Now, other elements, if you compare that with, say, the .NET and the classic ASP pages, they work in more or less the same way. So you can use them to discover everything you want about the interface. You've got complete control of what you want to do. They can create, read, update, delete, completely manage data in any way that you need it to do. Both work with workflow. Everything works absolutely fine. The only difference between the classic ASP pages and the .NET is you can't really use .NET for self-service. So it's not it's really only for extending the core product. We'll see and talk about self-service and its strengths and limitations a little bit later on as well. Now, in terms of the web services, that's the SOAP web services and the RESTful web services. Again, they're very much alike in what they can do. They're not able to build an interface. They are really designed for systems where you're only doing the management of the data. So you'd have to have another mechanism if you wanted to then build an interface on top of that. But so it's got limited understanding of metadata, although it does have translational abilities, especially the REST API is good on being able to work out what the user is doing and being able to translate captions appropriately as it returns things. There's a translation method. So as you come on to doing your work, we will be exploring more and more of what can we do with this API? What's the right thing in the right context? Okay. I mentioned there the idea of having data flowing from a corporate website, talked about self-service, and there are different ways in which we can have data flow from a web service corporate website through into a CRM system. But it's not just about getting data into CRM, it's about turning CRM inside out and having information flow from the internal systems out towards the customer-facing systems as well. So we can take, Sage CRM is very much this integrational hub. It can take back office system information that is appropriate and is defended in the right way, and to be able to then present that back through to customers through the different API options that we have. We can do this through the self-service API, which we have a specific lesson on later on. We can do this through the SOAP web services. We can do this very well within the REST API as well. We can also manage this through email that is generated from the website back into CRM, and again through mail management, which is a feature and a service within inside CRM. You could combine and construct emails that are automatically returned back, that draws on information from third-party systems, external systems to CRM. We'll also see that you can just do, like, let's poke some information into CRM through the web to lead as well feature as well. That's a really simple way of getting information from a website into CRM. Okay. Now we're almost on the final stretch in terms of what we're looking at here. One of the fascinating things about the experience that we've had over the last 3 years, if we think back onto COVID and the aftermath of COVID, is that we found that a lot of people were installing Sage CRM to help them in their operational control of their systems. So they were using Sage CRM as an integration hub to be able to allow very dispersed workforces to be able to then work together following standard processes while they're not in the office, to be able to improve those processes and to be able to then also to be able to improve the the procedures by capturing best practice into those services. This is where the concept of business rules comes in. We want to be able to make sure that everyone is managing something in a consistent, accurate, speedy, and safe way. So our business rules ability within Sage CRM is very strong. Now, I have a background in business rules, so nearly every time I talk about business rules, I want to bring them up and talk about them. You've got different types of business rules: policy rules, logic rules, process rules, data rules. Policy rules, if you like, are the type of rules that come from really the organization itself. Well, let's actually have a look at some examples of these. So it's to do with, we're going to work in this way type of policy rather than coming from the data itself. So it's to do with the organization and security. It's to do with the user interface choices that you're making and the work group choices that you're making. So translations and captions. So you should be able to say, any user should be able to use the French or the English interfaces if they want to. You should be able to enforce strict as cordons sanitaires between different departments so that users in the East Coast may not see the West Coast data. That's a policy. It's not in the nature of the data itself. It is how the organization is approaching that. It may want to have a security profile to say that a user can only see the information that is assigned directly to them. And on the in this grid, as we're outlining this, you can see we're using different tools within Sage CRM to implement those rules. So there we've got a feature called Teams, which means that you can set a rule that once you've put somebody into a particular team, like the marketing team, then you can say a marketing team member can view any opportunity they like. They can't edit it, but they can view it. You could use the concept of types of user, gradations of user between user, information manager, and system administrator to determine who can do things like send out a mass mail. These are all, as I said, policy rules. They're to do with the choices that an organization that says who is allowed to do what and how should we organize ourselves to do it. Different tools allow us to do different things. Logic rules come from the nature of the data. If you're thinking about the nature of the data model, you can see that when linking a task to a company, you may not link it to an opportunity that belongs to a different company. So that's to do with the integrity of the information that could be theoretically possible within a data model, but you don't want it because the internal logic says that the information belongs in the right place. Sage CRM has very strong tools to do logic. For example, a field level script can be used to say, if the user attempts to create a case for a company lacking a service level agreement, warn them or even prevent them, because that could be an absolute, you can't do this. And that again is logic, because why would you, in terms of the business process, why would you do anything along? You wouldn't process the case where the customer isn't paying you with a support contract. So there are these ideas of logic that comes from the way in which the information flows. We've got process rules as well. And here's an example of process rules. So these are to do with, as information changes and you get to a different point within the process, different rules apply. So consider the idea that as you get further and further along a sales cycle, you become more and more confident that you're able to sell that thing. So the opportunity certainty might allow you to enter a greater certainty the closer you get to the endpoint. That's to do with forecasting. And again, when we come on to doing workflow, we'll look at that in some detail. Data rules are to do with the nature of the data itself. And this is where if you make a change, something should happen. So when the company changes, rating changes, if that should flow back into perhaps the accounting system. If you reassign a company to a user, then you should reassign the opportunities and communications to a refreshed user as well. But let's see. We are going to be looking at workflow and processes and understanding these. Processes very often extend over more than one entity. So we've got inside Sage CRM the ability to create inter-entity workflows and processes, describing end-to-end processes here as a lead is then turned into a company and a person, escalated into the accounting system as a contact, converted into an opportunity, that opportunity is processed into having a quote, perhaps an order, and those quotes and orders are also sent across into the account system, or they originate within the account system and brought back into CRM and managed within the context of the opportunity. That individual opportunity can have a workflow which has multiple stages that we can then control and decide what actions take place that are down to the user and what actions take place down to the passage of time automatically. So we will be looking within the context of processes, understanding escalation behavior, things that will automatically place a notification onto the screen when something happens in a particular time frame, how emails can be sent out within a particular time frame when something happens, and how we can cascade and make changes automatically through the system as well without user involvement. It just takes place because it's time for that to take place. Now we are going to also think as we go through. We're on the last leg of this. We're going to think about adoption of different implementation methods. We're going to think about whether it is right to do big bang, phased, or parallel adoption. I'm going to say think about it. We're going to probably recommend you straight out of the tin that it's you go with the idea of a phased adoption example. That's really what we recommend within the workbooks that we have, that you take a phased approach to implementing Sage CRM, so it spreads across an organization. You do it in manageable chunks. You are able to do that because it fits very well with the idea of iterative development, the idea that you plan for one department, you can roll out, you get used to the implementation of procedures and the culture of an organization to be able to deliver it. You go through this, and it's a cyclical thing because Sage CRM doesn't stand still as a product. You're always going to have to be working with the idea that it's maintained and there's always security things to do. You're always going to be thinking about changing requirements from an organization because their own culture and business environment is changing, and there's also legislation which changes and the commercial environment changes, requiring us to constantly think about how we go through implementation. Now that takes us up to the end of the hour, so let's see. I can start to have a look at the questions that have perhaps come in to the sessions.